you want to survey the damage from yesterday? I've got a rip in the sort of hem binding, got a little hole there, and there, and there, and a little one there. Not too bad. From this side, I think that's just where I've caught it, so here, and plus there's a big one up here somewhere, but that's on the straight of grain, so that should be relatively easy to fix. I've got quite a reasonable amount of this fabric left, because I've also got a blouse in this fabric, and I think I plan to make a tie out of it, but it's not really actually suitable fabric to make a tie out of, so I'm going to match. First of all, try and match the grain of my patches to the grain of the skirt. Yeah, so that, put that bit over there. I'm probably actually going to patch this put the patches on the back of the skirt and neaten the tears on the front with a little bit of over sewing, which is not a, that just tends to be how I repair my skirts, so I don't end up with the actual patch on the front, but we'll sort of see. They're all relatively close to the hem, so they're not going to be hugely noticeable. And also, I'm at home for an indefinite amount of time, so no one's going to see. What's going on over here? Covering that bit. And I'm also cutting these much bigger than I need to. I'm learning a great deal in trying to film things that I have to be careful, or otherwise all anybody sees when I'm doing anything is the back of my wrists, which, you know, it's fine, but it's not very helpful, is it? I think you're going that way. Yeah, let's put that on there. I'm sure there are probably rules about how you patch things, but I'm not a great one for following rules. Okay, that'll do for now. Actually, that one I might just be able to sew that to the skirt, to the hem binding. Maybe you can go over here. Oh yeah, look, you'll fit over there. Although you're not quite the same grain. A little square of pins around that. Do the same over here. I've done this sort of fixing before on woolen gowns that have got moth holes in, which is quite good, but putting the new fabric behind and then doing a little overcast stitch, a little whip stitch around the hole. Again, make a little square of pins. Oh, I might not cut that one big enough. Then again, if I did it there, it's not a very big hole. Yeah, let's do that. Right, we'll start off with those two big ones, I think. So I've just threaded a needle in brown cotton, and I'm going to do probably just a little square in running stitch where my pins are. I don't know if you're even going to be able to see this because I'm sewing brown on brown, my favourite combination. And I mean that, brown is my favourite colour. So yeah, I think I will go for a running stitch rather than a back stitch. As it's, well, the skirt's only made out of one layer of fabric, there's no interlining or even a facing at the hem, just a braid. Right, there's my first corner, so I will do a back stitch there and then a back stitch there just to reinforce those bits. This is where you end up just seeing my wrist again. So this is the hardest thing I'm learning, is how as in any job I'm doing, how not to just film the back of my wrists the whole time. Perhaps I could turn the skirt around a little bit as well, couldn't I? So reached another little corner, another back stitch. Okay, last little row, back up here to form my square. Okay, I'll just do a couple of back stitches there to fasten that off, although I won't cut the thread away yet. Let's have a look. See how this looks on this side. That's where my stitching is. I'm happy with that. Doesn't show too much. I've got a back stitch showing through there, but that's fine. So now I'm going to trim my excess fabric away. I suppose it would be nice to have... Right, I'm going to leave probably about ½ an inch seam allowance for now. I can always trim it down to a bit less. This is where doing alterations on fabrics that's got a grid pattern or lines is really helpful. You just go, oh, I shall cut along there. That one's a bit narrower. It's already there. And now I'm just going to fold the raw edges in. Oh, sorry. Set you precariously wobbling there. So today I do actually have a tripod of sorts for my phone, because that's all we're recording this on. And it's now precariously balanced, very precariously balanced, on my sewing machine with the faithful IKEA light that I had previously been using as the tripod, giving us some extra illumination. I'm starting to see why people people buy proper equipment to do this? I mean, I'm having a lovely time playing around here, but I'm not sure how useful any of it is because you can't really see what I'm doing. I'm also filming this early in the morning, which is the time of day that if anything's going to be delivered, and probably the most traffic goes past on our road, which admittedly is not a lot, and it means the dog will bark every time it looks like someone might even think about sort of stopping near our house, so I apologise for that in advance. He's quite noisy, and there isn't a lot of stopping him once he starts, so we might just have to pause around that. Anyway, so that's all of the raw edges turned in. That bit's overlapping onto my hem guard a bit, but that's fine. Could do with a whole new bit of hem guard there. I have more of this brown tape, so that's not really a problem. Okay, so now I've neatened my square off. I'll find my needle. Just going to move the needle through the patch of fabric out to the edge, and I'm just going to do, well, I don't know whether it would be a little slip stitch, I suppose, or even or it'd even be counted as a little whip stitch, but I'm only picking up one strand of the main fabric, but biting into the patch fabric, so hopefully this isn't going to show. That's where I am stitching on the front. Hopefully that isn't going to show there. And I'm now going to go round, trying not to pull too tightly on the front because I don't want to sort of cause a little puckered square where I'm sewing. So we're just going to do. You see, my boss, the cutter that I work with quite a bit, he would call this a little whip stitch. I would call it a slip stitch. And some people might call it a hem stitch, although I think a hem stitch is a slightly different stitch. That's something I could demonstrate the difference with at some point, the difference between a slip stitch and a hem stitch, although I know it is debatable amongst people which one's which. There's also a fell stitch, but is that just the same as a hem stitch or a slip stitch? It's, you know, it's interesting. Sometimes I say I'm now sew the hem with a slip stitch, or I might say now sew the hem with a hem stitch. I'm lazy and mostly do slip stitches because it's quicker, but other people are quicker at hemming. Alice Gordon of White Rabbit Linens, who makes absolutely beautiful linen white work, lots of it 16th and 17th century, is probably queen of the hem stitch, and does it, I should think she does so much of it, she must do it quicker than anybody else. Not quite pattern matching there, but if anyone's going to be looking at the inside of my hem, then things have probably gone drastically wrong anyway. Or I'm showing them how I've repaired it. And going, look, didn't do a very good job there, did I? That would be about right. I'm a great one for pointing out mistakes. Okay, halfway around now, let's just have another look at the front. Bit puckered, but I can live with that, I think. Which is the best way to look at this. Got a really long bit of thread today as well because I'm lazy and didn't want to rethread. That's not good sewing practice at all. when I when I did this yesterday and tore my skirt, I went home. I tried carrying on cycling for a bit, but because I was then holding the sort of back hem of my skirt in my right hand and also holding onto the handlebars, I then didn't have perfect control, and I'm quite a clumsy person anyway, and even with absolutely no traffic around, which there was none yesterday, I thought probably not a good idea to try and carry on doing the whole of my bicycle ride, because I plan to sort of go around there's a couple of sort of circular routes I can do around here. I plan to do one of them, which is about 4 or 5 miles. And I thought, no, it'd be... And some of that is on main road, not just the country roads. So I thought, maybe not a good idea to do that without full control of the bike. So I turned around and came back, probably confusing the person who was in a field doing some clearing as to why the mad woman went past one way and then went back the other way almost straight away again. But I think our neighbours, they've got used to us. That's probably the best I can say. Right, let's do a couple of little stitches on the spot to fasten off. And move the thread to the front. So that's not too bad, is it? I can't even see it on there, but that's that. That's from the front. And now, okay, so now for neatening up the front. The proper way of patching this nicely would be to actually cut into the top fabric and fold it in to form a nice little square sitting within the other square that we've got. But I'm trying to, I don't know, I want to keep this as sort of discreet as possible. So rather than cutting anything away, I've just tucked the raw edges in of the rip. And I'm going to do a little really close together slip stitch, whip stitch again. Can you see that? Like that. So it will form a little tiny ridge. There we are. Just tuck those raw edges in with the needle. And this is where I'm quite pleased about my pattern matching, because I've got that line is matching up there, which is what I wanted. And as I said, I've done this sort of repair before, mostly on plain wools rather than pattern fabric, when I've had moth holes, and it's, you know, it's surprisingly effective, because moths, they never eat, you know, the side back hem of something. They always like to go for the front and visible. I have a lot of problem with moths. We've got them in the house, and I've got mothballs, I've got cedarwood, I've got spray-on stuff. I put cedarwood essential oil in the corners, and I freeze my clothes because that kills any eggs, and yet we still have moths. So a lot of my clothes are just sort of rotating their way through. They go in the freezer for a bit, they come back in the house, and then they go back in the freezer again just to make sure nothing's living in them. It's really annoying. Occasionally I can't find a bit of clothing, or my partner can't find a bit of clothing. He's like, and he especially can't find a bit of clothing. And he's like, I haven't seen that, where is it? And then I have to sort of go through the freezer, which is the same freezer we keep our food in. So, you know, I then have to go out for a rummage and go, oh, I found it. Last time I did that, I wanted my 16th century doublet bodice, and we were just about to go out somewhere. We were going to go to Kentwell Hall, which is where I do the reenactment. I don't do the reenactment anymore, but we were going there for the evening to see people and dance in a ceilidh dance, and they like it if you wear costume for that. So I got my bodice, got a shift and a bodice petticoat on. I'd got modern shoes on because it was the evening, and could not find my doublet bodice anywhere, and eventually sort of rummaged through the freezer, found it. It was completely frozen and solid, so I hung it on the washing line for a bit in the sunshine, and that sort of defrosted it. that is me. I've whipped all the way around my hole now. Quite happy with that. It doesn't look too obvious, so I can now fasten off and move on to the next one. So I just fasten off. There we are, front and the back. And you know, I could put the patch on the front really. It blends in quite nicely when you match the pattern. But I think I'd rather leave it like that. So I'm now going to do the rest in exactly the same way, and then we'll tackle the big split on the centre back, but I might have to move to show you that. So this is my next little repair here. I'm going to do exactly the same as I did before. Running stitch round in a square, turn the raw edges in, neaten it off, and then move to the front and do a little whip stitch round those fraying edges. So, and if anyone wants me to cover any other sort of mending, I could always give that a go. One of the advantages, is it an advantage of this? Me wearing my historical and old-fashioned clothing all the time is that I don't really, you know, hold back in what I do in it. So I do have to mend it quite often because I'm quite clumsy. So all the things that, you know, you do in your normal clothes, I do in my clothes, and occasionally I need to either wash them or fix them or mend them. If it's really bad, start all over again, find a way of repurposing the fabric. And I suppose I quite enjoy that, really. That's part of the fun, is finding out how you can make your clothes last. Having a mending pile, as I say, I just went through my mending pile because I thought, well, I've fixed the skirt. What else is in the mending pile? I found 2 of my petticoats in there, so and both of them just need the ribbon strap sewing back on. Really nothing too challenging at all. So I'm going to do that next, and I'm going to fix a cardigan of mine. The cardigan's a modern one. I've got quite a few of them in the same style actually, and I really like them. They're a gorgeous style. You might recognise them. They're the Emmy Design Sweden ones, but I do find I have to repair them. Not all the time, but they do sometimes need a little bit of darning or a little bit of fixing, and I'm not sure if that's because I'm just wearing them too much. I try not to overwear them. I've got quite a few, and I try and rotate them so nothing gets, you know, worn too much, but I still seem to have to repair them occasionally. As soon as lockdown happened for me and I came home from work, I was like, right, what we're going to do to make this worthwhile. I mean, I've got a jobs list as long as your arm of things I should be doing or need to be doing. For number 1, for other people. Number 2, for the house. Number 3, for me. But the thing I actually sort of settled down and did straight away is I started darning, and this just sounds ridiculous, but I started darning my partner's socks because he wears very long woolly socks. I think they're quite often described as shooting socks or kilt socks. And they're really long, but he wears them out at the heel, and so this whole nice long sock is wasted because it's worn out right at the heel, and you can't really, it's, you know, it'd be a complete waste of time and money to throw them out because of that. And so he normally just actually wears them, and I always think, oh, one day I'll get round to that. And that one day is here, so I've been darning them. I've got about 2 pairs to go, which felt like quite an achievement. And I just did that while watching television. I did that while watching Picard and Outlander. So yeah, so that made me feel a bit better about sitting watching television, and got a job done. So that was nice. Normally, rather than watch stuff while I sew, I'm more of a listener. I listen to Radio 4, which is British talk radio. I've listened to that for years. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I am generally always listening to a podcast. If you ever want any podcast recommendations, I'm definitely up for that. Although most of the ones I listen to are quite humorous. Some of them are serious. I've been down the whole true crime route, but I've actually just, you know, I sort of had my fill of that. I listen to one true crime podcast, but that's a very particular nature. I'll go into that another day. So now that I've done the running stitch all the way around, now I'm just folding the edges in, and I'm going to slip stitch it as before. I've done a little bit of a smaller seam allowance this time just to see if it looks a bit neater or looks a bit lighter, and then we can sort of compare them afterwards. Okay, so that's all pinned in. Slip stitching around the inside. Slip stitch, whip stitch, fell stitch, hem stitch. It would be nice to get all of those figured out, wouldn't it? Okay, and now I'm right back to where I started, so I should just do a couple of stitches on the spot to fasten off. And now I realise, because of the little speeded up interlude and background music, you may have lost track of where I am. So now we're moving, I've sewn the patch onto the back and we're now moving to the front. And this time I'm actually going to cut into the hole, make it slightly larger in order to neaten the edges off better. I'm just changing scissors because I know I needed some sharper scissors. So there I am. I'm cutting into the sort of corners of each side of the hole to turn it into a square. So it was sort of a round hole, and I'm actually neatening it off with a pin there to tuck the raw edges in into more of a square shape. And then I'm going to overstitch exactly like I did before. I hope that makes it clearer as to what I was doing. Just a little bit there that also got caught. But I think rather than cut that away, I'm going to just, what am I going to do there? I'm just going to fasten on the back on my patch fabric. Let's come out a bit further away. And then what I'm going to do, so my needle's here, the little hole's here, I'm actually just going to do a little running stitch all the way across through the hole, and then just do that again going back the other way. Do the same the other side. So I'm just sewing the outer fabric that's got the tear to the patch fabric underneath. This isn't proper darning. When I darn knitwear or woolly garments, you can actually sort of weave a new section with your thread, but this time I'm just sort of sewing straight lines up and down to strengthen it. And I'm still going to do just a few stitches around the actual hole as well, so hopefully it won't sort of be a weak area that something could get caught in, because I do catch my skirt on things, like, you know, we all catch our clothes on things sometimes, and as I said, there's nothing to stop me going through for a walk through the undergrowth, or well, actually just walking in my garden. There's quite a lot of junk in my garden. I could catch my clothes on it quite easily. Alright, that'll do for now. Just fasten off. Okay, that's I think the biggest hole from the chain. What else have I got left to do? So I've done that one, done that one, done that one there. Okay, let's find a little bit for that one there. Poor thing's starting to look a bit Frankenstein-y now, but hopefully I'll give it a press and that will help as well. Last little bit, just... oh, you can see where it got chewed up. I do have some more of this tape. I could just replace that little bit. But I'm not going to, I'm just going to... it's already starting to come undone there anyway. I've had a lot of trouble with this hem because I like to wear this skirt with a pair of brown boots that have button hook, you know, boot hooks on, you know, sort of like very typical Victorian style fastening. And they're quite long boots, and because I walk quite aggressively, even when I'm wearing a petticoat, I find the hem stitching I've done, however tiny and tight I do it on this skirt, somehow manages to catch it in the boot hooks whenever I wear it, and I've ripped it, I've tripped over it, I've got it tangled up, sort of hobbled myself, that, you know, the back of my skirt hem has got caught to the very front of my boot or wrapped around my leg and got tangled up, and I've nearly fallen over on several occasions, so it doesn't seem to matter how well I sew it. But I'm not resorting to machining it because I don't like how that looks. So that's where a whole encased hem would be a much better option. You know, if I'd flat-lined it, or even actually properly lined the skirt and sewn the hem down over it, you wouldn't have so much to catch. But then again, it seems so determined. Oh, that's going to do. I'm just going to re-sew that bit there, which is an old repair of mine anyway. Old repair. I think I only made this skirt in October or November. It's had quite a hard life already, but then my clothes generally do. Just put the skirt on the ironing board. I mean, you can still see a little bit of the damage, but I'm going to give it a press now, and hopefully that'll improve the overall look of it. And then I will try it on and walk round and film the rest of that. That'll be quite handy for me to see if I can see it in the filming, and you can see it when I'm wearing it. Or hopefully you won't be able to see it. It looks better for a press. It's not perfect, but nobody's going to see me for a couple of months, so hopefully I can make some more skirts to wear out, and this one might have to stay an at home and in the garden one, but I think that'll be fine. There's a close-up of the repair. And there's a little chunk out of the hem there, but I think I can live with that. As I said, this skirt's got a few dings and worn parts anyway from just me wearing it and catching it on my boots. So that's my repair. I hope that was helpful.